seat, please. Tahir Archive. Would you kindly introduce our honored guests?
Yes, sir. So today we have 4 guests. Firstly, immediately on my right is Tony Tharian. Tony works in the city. He's an investment advisor, and he works with a lot of high net worth individuals investing on their behalf. Right.
And which
he works for Prudential Beige.
Which country does he belong to originally? I mean,
he is Christian by faith, but he is a Pakistani.
That's what I'm
That's
asking.
right. He's a Pakistani.
He looked like a Pakistani or Indian anyway.
That's right. He's Pakistani. That's right.
Right.
Then right next to Tony is Frank O'Toole. Frank O'Toole is a journalist and has previously been an editor of a property magazine. He has also written for the Times, and at the moment he is the general secretary for a community centre where various activities take place.
Right.
Next to Tony is Richard Beslew. Richard is an architect by profession, and I think that is yes. Right next to Richard is Naomi Whittle. Naomi is a teacher by profession.
And that's alien too.
That's right. Currently, she's actually a student. She's doing a theology, an MA in theology.
In theology.
Yes. And her specialist subject for dissertation is our community Ahmadi Jamaat.
Is it right? Yes.
So that is our questionnaires today. I would first request Tony to ask his question.
Sir, what I wanted to know was that the world is increasingly being dominated both politically and economically by the developed world, both in trade and finance, and that's given it the ability to dictate terms to the developing countries. I was just interested in your views on this imbalance.
Well, this is how nature works. Might is right in the sense that might prevails. Otherwise, the right and wrong of things do not matter. In natural struggle for existence and domination, it always happens. Might must prevail. So they are mighty because of their knowledge. They are mightier because of many other qualities they possess. And we must understand that they have every right to dominate the world. And for those who are dominated, it's very important that they should follow those qualities of the West, or highly developed countries like Japan, which make them dominant. Just by talking against them and entering into abuse and vilification has no common sense in it. It's just absurd. Only political leaders want to highlight certain so-called defects of these people, their treatment, maltreatment of others, to gain a political objective by letting the people know that we are their true champions and that we don't like the Western domination. But when it comes to their submission to the West, they are the most humble servants of the West, these political leaders. Invariably, this is what happens. So this is a duality which is working. One face is for the people of the country, the other face is for the Western countries. So in their own country they loudly outcry each other in calling the West bad names of this and that. But when it comes to their tour of the West, you will see them prostrating before the Western leadership. That's what I think happens. Please?
Next, Frank.
Yes, so I'm Irish by birth and Catholic by upbringing. what part in religion does nationalism play? Or should nationalism and religion be always kept separate?
No part. The moment nationalism raises its head in religion, both are wrong. Nationalism has no right to interfere with religion. Religion has no right to interfere with nationalism. So they belong to different domains. Every religious person has a nationality. No religion has any nationality. So how can you mix them together? It's not possible. If religion is not true, if it is so-called religion, then you can mix it with any other value as you please. But true religions have no nationality. I hope I have made myself clear.
Exactly.
I'm interested in exploring the unknown dimension that orders and structures everything.
Please?
I'm interested in exploring the unknown dimension that orders and structures everything. So I'd like to ask, how does science threaten the biological and the physical world? Do we misuse
How
our...
did what threaten the biological and physical world?
Yes.
Science.
How is science threatening the biological and physical worlds? Do we misuse our knowledge rather than understand it?
Now I think the premise of the question is not right as far as I see. Science is not threatening physical world or anything. It is how you employ science. So the factor is human factor and the factor of the mind. Scientists can be good scientists and bad scientists. Scientists can be only an instrument in the hands of a nation to employ them for obtaining their objectives. In that, scientists have are not to be censured for what they are used for. In atomic explosion, it is not the scientists who suggested that atomic explosion should be used to suppress political powers. Einstein, when he visited America before the explosion took place in Hiroshima, etc., strongly advised the American government not to go ahead with that, because he said that if you do it once, then you open the floodgate of disruption and other holocausts of a similar nature. So he said, we have done it because this is a scientific task given to us. But if you employ it wrongly, that's your responsibility, not ours. So I think he was absolutely right in that. And that is why some people unnecessarily censure scientists for this or that. They are just serving a cause of knowledge, of truth. How they are employed or their services are employed is not their fault. Please.
My question now concerns the responsibility of religious education in schools, and I'm wondering, should it be the responsibility of teachers to teach about the different faiths and religions and run the risk of misinformation when teachers are not as clued up as they should be, or should it be perhaps the role of leaders of the faith communities?
The most important thing is to remove the contradiction which prevails in our educational institutions and the attitude of the government towards religious education and moral education. The whole thing has to be re-examined in depth, because somehow they do not fall into a good pattern without friction between one religion and another religion. Now, first of all, children are raised in their homes. They are raised in the homes of atheists, of Hindus, of Sikhs, of Muslims, etc., and Catholics, of course. So what education are they given during their childhood? That is the question. Do the parents have a right to educate them in religion or not? If they have a right, then how can suddenly, when they go to the school-going age, a completely different education in the name of religion is given to them, where ideological differences are highlighted, where moral teaching, which is in fact common to all religions, is absolutely absent. So in the name of religion, immoral teaching is provided to them. It's a fantastic duality of a situation, unfortunately. For instance, when the children start going to schools, at their homes they have variously learned their moral responsibilities according to the ideologies of the parents to whom they were born. But when they go to the school, they are told, look here, you are free. You are not bound to follow the religious moral education of your parents. Now you are coming of age. And with that, you do not owe any responsibility to the moral structure of your family background. You can do anything, and you will not be punished for that. That is one teaching. The other is, as far as the law of the land is concerned, up till now we have been kind and lenient to you because you were young. You are coming of age, and the moment you reach a certain age, you reach the age of answerability, and then you will be strictly treated. Now, why this contradiction in the two attitudes? In reality, they are told not to pay attention to God-made laws of morality, but they must subscribe to the man-made laws of immorality. Now, when you create this, contradiction in your society, then you help crime grow, and you abet crime to grow and spread fast. Strangely, these boys and girls who commit moral crimes, they are fully supported by the social system, and parents are told, you have nothing to do with it, keep to yourself, we are taking over your children. And they are told, we will supply you expenses, lodging, etc. Just don't listen to your parents. And when they grow older, then they are told that they must listen to the system prevailing in the country, the man-made laws. As I told you, as I have suggested before, this is the prime root cause of all evil which is spreading in the society today. So somebody should take care of this. Heads should be joined together to think over it. It's not a political issue. It is not just a moral issue. It is an issue which deals with the day-to-day running of the country, which deals with crime, its growth, the root causes, why it grows. So I think it's very important that at national level, all political parties should join their heads to understand the real problems and try to eradicate them.
My next question was regarding the advances that have been made in genetic medicine, and what do you think is the place for traditional medicine now?
Genetic medicine is a new chapter opened in the modern science. This is very precarious because it can lead to disasters, and it's too young to be tested. Genetic change is brought about in some insects, for instance, which was supposed to be a horror for certain crops, may have eradicated those insects, but at what cost? Maybe at the cost of some other insects which could not flourish under their domination, but they could be even more dangerous in many other ways. And moreover, the genetic changes brought about are not the last word said. Many genetic changes which are brought about do not stop at that, but further new distortions of the species begin to take place, which go on taking place, running into next many other generations, and it may be too long for man to realize that the genetic changes which were brought about were in fact progressive internal changes which we have released and which may run into very dangerous consequences for man. On this subject, some advanced genetic scientists have already opined. They have made a group in America to contest the right of some other scientists to bring about these genetic changes, but I think no final decision has yet been taken. But one thing is very clear, that through genetic changes, when they produce certain welcome effects in grains, for instance, where the wheat grains grow bigger and larger, those scientists who know the subject, they say that their effect on the body or on the system may not be welcome at all. It may hurt, if not the first generation, the second or third generation of the people who consume these things. And how they will react to the natural phenomenon of assimilation and rejection. This phenomenon is a very complicated phenomenon, very profound and almost invisible. Not almost, entirely invisible. Because human system of assimilation and rejection is based on certain things which scientists do not understand. They have only come to understand that these things happen. But why should they happen? They don't know. There are some medicines which were supposed to be very beneficial for pregnant women, and it cured their nausea, and they felt absolutely happy under the influence of those medicines. But many among them, when they gave birth to the child they were carrying, it was distorted. It had no limbs, for instance, or misplaced organs, misplaced. His eyes, instead of going here, maybe going there. Something happened. Completely, the organization of the living system was destroyed. Now, what follows is the most interesting part to which I am referring, in fact. The same companies proved scientifically that the formulae of the medicine the formula of the medicine which was given to both pregnant women who reacted favorably or unfavorably was exactly the same. There was no fault of theirs. They could not understand why it should not have acted exactly as it acted in other cases. But then some researchers discovered the culprit. The culprit was the spin of the atoms or molecules they were made of. Now the spin of the molecules of the same medicine with same formula, with same chemical properties, with the same physical properties, without the least change, is different. The spin is different. In some of the same chemicals, it could spin to the right, in some it could spin to the left. It was discovered that where, for instance, I'm not for sure the right spinning or left spinning was beneficial, but one of the spin was beneficial. And mothers who took that chemical, whose spin could not be determined by any electronic device. Just it happened that some had the internal right spin, for instance. They were all right, their nausea disappeared, etc., etc. But some mothers took the left spinning molecules instead, and they played the havoc. Now, no scientific instrument can determine the spin of the molecules. There are other indirect ways to determine whether they spin right way or the left way. But in the chemical properties and physical properties, the scientists have not discovered a smallest element of change. But the effect is so horrendous in some that it appears unbelievable. What detected this? What was within the system which reacted against a certain spin? That shows, apart from other things, the existence of soul or mind, which somehow knows whether something is good for the body or bad for the body, which somehow determines things which scientific instruments cannot. Now this is something which applies also to the genetic changes brought about. When you genetically produce some food which is cheaper and because the grains are bigger, then of course you draw some economic benefits from that. But when this food is mixed with other food and we have a free intake of this diet available in the market, what other things may occur within the system we don't know as yet. And I think this is the debate which is going on in Britain as well nowadays, because somebody is protesting against buying cheap food from America and mixing it with ready-made food like you find in tins and things. And they say you use it, but you have every responsibility to tell the buyer that in the food he or she they are buying, there is an element of this food whose consequences we do not know. So unless they clarify this, and in so many words, they are cheating their customers and cheating them to some possibly some horrendous effects. So this is the answer to the question. Scientists may be honest or dishonest, that's a definite separate affair. How you use their scientific product is the most essential point. Yes?
So from time to time people say the end of the world is nigh,
Yes.
and they've become more or less a musical
History.
joke.
Yes.
Now we're told in 1998 that in 30 years' time there's a likelihood of a meteorite smashing into the earth and causing cataclysmic damage and possibly ending life as we know it. If there is going to be a second coming or a first coming of the Lord to earth, does that put pressure on the Lord to get here within the next 30 years, or will that be the second coming?
Now this end of the world prophecies or prediction are mostly based on scriptures. Misreading of scriptures and misinference, misdrawing of inference. And it serves the cause of the church, because from time to time they shake up their followers into some religious activity and also kindle the hope or rekindle hope in the coming of Christ. Now this has been going on for the last 2000 years, not 2000, 1500 years or so, and he has not come. So the second part of your question, that maybe reminds the Lord that now is the time for me to come, that's not true. He has been reminded so often, so repeatedly, but he never took note of that. Because I believe that the way we are expecting him to come is unreal. Never in the history of religion anybody called him a manifestation of God or God himself has ever descended from heaven bodily to this earth. Never. While most of the religious history is left in the past. And I doubt if in the future God will invent a new plan. Whatever you observe from the history as it unveils itself is contradictory to such expectations. So people are lulled into a sort of believing state of sleep, in which they believe on without challenging their beliefs. And the benefit is accrued by the church leaders mostly, but also it does damage. Because repeatedly people know that they have been promised this and the promise does not come true. That's one damage, but another far more important damages are about to our conception of how God works. Whether he has created this universe with a purpose or without a purpose. Does it have a design, or only accidents play their part? Now, if the universe is a design and God had a purpose in creating it, then accidental raining or meteorite or anything could not be permitted to take place, which will interfere with the purpose of life. That is why the news item to which you have referred has another story as well. Some other scientists have discovered and proved it mathematically that it is impossible for that meteorite to strike the earth. It will pass by a very long margin, so long that it could be counted in light years or time in the light scale. So this is wrong. Whenever a asteroid or any large chunk of free floating heavenly bodies is permitted to strike the earth, it always serves a purpose, never without a purpose. One example which I have been speaking of many times is that of dinosaurs. Scientists were baffled for a long time. Why should dinosaur come to a sudden rapid extinction? Incidentally, when they speak of sudden rapid extinction, they do not mean in days, months or years. They refer to the scale of evolution, and with that reference what they mean is in 100,000 or 2,000, 100,000 years. Small scale. But still they could not understand. They had dominated the world for a very long time. And suddenly, within a matter of 100,000 years or so, they became totally extinct. What happened? Later on, they discovered, another branch of science discovered, that during the time they started to disappear. I mean, this environments were far too difficult for them to cope with. A very large meteor is known to have dropped in the middle of ocean. The shape of oceans was different from that which we find now. But most of the ocean which was surrounding the land mass had its effect, direct or indirect, on the land species which are progressing through evolution, as they call it. What happened was, when this asteroid dropped into the middle of the ocean, it released immense rise of water particles, gases, etc. into the air, so that from north to south the world was divided into two parts because of that great rise from the impact of the meteor of various substances and gases, etc., etc. Now they remained here on the earth for a very long time, covering the entire world, creating that effect which is carbon dioxide excessive effect. What do you call it?
Ozone.
Huh?
Ozone.
No. Where carbon dioxide grows greater in proportion and stands between sunlight and the earth and the water.
Smog.
What?
Smog.
Yes.
Yes.
When this happens, the earth begins to grow warmer. And with that warmth, the snow at both peaks, in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, begins to melt. And some drastic changes are brought about in the environment. Those changes, when they affected the growth on dry land adversely, the first to hit were the dinosaurs, because they were accustomed to eating far more than ordinary small animals. The result was that the small animals, who were most often hidden in shelter for the fear of dinosaurs, they started coming out in the open, and the dinosaurs started becoming extinct. And by the time they became extinct, earthquakes and other conditions buried them deep under the ground. Now they understand this, but I specifically want to tell you that it was not an accident. It was a design, because most of the earthquakes and other changes in the environment which took place were responsible for all the oil which we discover today underground. Large mass of trees and shrubs, etc., were buried not only near to the surface, deep into the surface. all the bodies of dinosaurs went deep down by the side of oceans. All this was not a consequence of accident. It was design. Or we might have achieved know-how how to use oil without any oil to be available. So these underground treasures were discovered or made to discover by God only when man's scientific knowledge has advanced enough to start thinking of internal combustion engine. Oil was necessary for that. And the moment the scientist's mind was searching for some fuel which should not be externally used like coal, but should be internally used, that moment when they conceived of it, the possibility of aeroplanes, motor cars, etc., all became a reality. And it became a reality only because of dinosaurs. You see, and there was rapid extension and all that happened. So a meteor which struck the earth at that time was understood to be an accident. But when you study the consequences, you absolutely rule out the possibility of an accident. So, if this meteor you're referring to did ever hit or anything like that, I'm sure maybe after 100,000 years or so, people will begin to realize that it was not an accident. Please?
Is man basically the same everywhere?
Huh?
Is man
Basically,
the same everywhere
the same everywhere, right?
and at all times? In essence, do primitive people from primitive tribes think just as rationally as modern man?
There is no such thing as modern man. Man has always been mature. When you go back to the history of Greece and the Greek philosophers, show me one modern philosopher who can replace Aristotle. Not one. So it is a myth, man-made myth, that we are advanced and the people before us were not advanced and they were small and insignificant people. Mind has evolved not in the way the scientists believe. It has evolved on a different pattern altogether, with the result that the difference between animal mind other than human and the human mind is so vast that no steps can fill in this vast difference between the two. You can't imagine even 1,000 different species separating the two, which could lead step by step to the evolution of mind. So when we come to mind, we have to believe in God. And there's one other reason why. The more I understand these phenomena, the more I'm convinced of the existence of God. No scientific explanation have ever come across me which explains the step by step, bit by bit evolution of mind from the minds of animals to the mind of man. This makes the most ancient man you can conceive more worthy of respect than what is paid to him. They were sensible people. They do their conclusions right, but only the availability of material was limited. So when it was enlarged, the minds began to do larger and more subtle conclusions. So as I have given the example of Aristotle, before him there was Socrates, And the Socrates also writes about philosophers before him. Imagine how far before they would be, who according to him believed in God and whose philosophical exercises did not lead them away from God but towards God. So the question of mind evolving in the sense which is understood is not right. Mind, in my opinion, is devolving in the sense, in some areas. Whenever you find mind truly illuminated, it must be illuminated with truth and justice. Truth helps mind to evolve. Not just a religious truth. Religious truth, I understand, is important, but truth as such is important for religion as well. That is why I believe that older philosophers who appear to be so enlightened and so modern, they in fact were true people. And the world today has not remained true anymore. Our political leadership, our economic leadership, our religious leadership, all leadership is deteriorating into falsehood, deception, contradiction, etc. So from this principle I can prove, I think, to my satisfaction at least, that mind of man is not improving. And when it is not improving, it has become a source of danger for mankind. It may make some false decisions which are not universal but related to their own nations, which may ultimately usher in the period of man's destruction at the hand of a Holocaust, which possibly will be a nuclear Holocaust. Now, these are just my thinkings, but I am convinced that they must be right because they are based on principles which cannot be denied. So man is alive everywhere. And as far as the African people are concerned, they should feel happy about the fact that more the scientists study of the origin of humans, they are more convinced that they first appeared in Africa. So they are the forefathers of all humanity. Changes do occur which are not necessarily genetic changes, but genetics is also to some degree influenced by environmental factors. So, but the deeper construction of the bricks of life is not changed. The sequence of proteins, etc., long chains which are impossible to be created by themselves remain the same. Small changes occur in some genes here and there, but they are insignificant changes. Now they happen to change, and they also bring about the change in many racial characters. Like a Jewish character can be understood to be an entity in itself. Like the Western European character can be divided into some groups, like Germanic groups and other groups, but these characters remain independent and distinct from others. So if that is what you mean, I agree that such differences are found, but they do not obviate the origin, the single origin of man's production. Here I must also inform you that recently a debate is raging in Australia about certain finds of animal fossils, which indicate that man had diverged into a different branch much before the chimpanzees. and the common ancestor are both the chimpanzees and humans. Was not chimpanzees, but somewhere back in history, about many 100,000 years before that, or many millions years before that. Now, some naive religious people infer from this, I took here, Darwin is absolutely wrong. After all, we have not evolved. We did evolve, but not directly from chimpanzees. We evolved from the ancestors of chimpanzees, who are less developed than chimpanzees are. So it doesn't give us any right to be proud of. We share the common parenthood in much remoter time, from animals which are much worse in their looks, in their character than chimpanzees are. So what is the point of pride? That we took we originated not from developed forms of life, but filthier and much lower forms of life. But even those were very close to the summit of evolution. The point is, which I want to make here, why did all the species between those parents and us disappear? Why did it disappear? That shows that the gap is far too big, inexplicably big. And from there onwards, the traces of Darwinian evolution disappear. Some mechanism takes over, of which we have no knowledge. But the distance between man and the animal species is enlarged to such great expense that we can't understand how it happened, unless there was a designer, unless we believe in God who organized all this. Have I answered you? Or maybe I see a little question mark on your face, which shows that perhaps I've answered some of the questions, but not all.
You have answered all of it.
Huh?
And yes, you have. I was just.
But what do you want to ask me?
Yes, I was looking at it, trying to understand that you see it as an arrogance, really, as man's arrogance.
Arrogance, yes.
And really, that was really more to do with the answer that I was hoping for.
So the shade of your question was, in fact, a wonderment at what we have led into. Huh?
Yes,
that's right.
Thank you. That's it.
Please.
Back to education. Do you think there should be more opportunities in Britain for state Muslim schools to be established, or perhaps all schools
That's
should
a
be?
very disastrous thing to do, to permit, because the areas of dogmas and beliefs must not be touched by any government, any political government in the world, anywhere. Once they do it, they open a Pandora's box, which could be never shut again. If the Muslims have that right, and if they have right to be funded by the political government, why do not have Hindus that right, who are larger in population? And why not Sikhs, Jews, etc., all of them have that separate right to expect funding by the government for running schools which are confined only to their indoctrination and their ideologies. That is as far as the outer relationship is concerned. The internal relationship is far more dangerous to concentrate upon. Far more dangerous when you concentrate upon it. The Muslims were divided into so many sects. If one sect approaches the same Department of Education and says what they're educating is not Islamic. You can prove it, that from the fundamentals of Islam this is wrong. They are sowing the seed of hatred within Muslims. So we have a right to open our school, and you have an obligation to fund us as well. Each sect will be provided that right. And the internal differences are so big and so fundamental that this is a reality. It can happen and will happen soon in future. Now, what would the British government do at that time? Justice would demand that if you have treated one sect, or without knowing that you are helping one sect, every sect has a right to demand the same from you. So that is why I am strictly against this. They will gain more power and turn it into political power. The schools would bring out generations of such students who will be taught in hating the Britain, because they will be taking pride in the fact that we fought brave battles against the British Raj, and that sect did not. Now, the message there would be that this is a fundamental to Islam, that we must hate Britain and other Western nations. It goes very deep into their education, and because of organizing hooligan groups or militant groups within your country, they would be able to influence politics even more than before. You say, listen to us, fulfill our requirements, or we go to the streets and disrupt the peace of the country. And this is what they plan to do. I don't know what's happening to the traditional British wisdom. They are just now trying to gain small advantages by pleasing some ethnic groups so that they would cast their vote in their favor. That's a very small gain as against these big losses, which I think should be brought to the notice of British people. Huh?
I agree.
Thank you.
My next question is that materialism is increasingly putting pressure on family values, leading to increased rates of divorce and separation, and which is becoming now part of the norm. Does traditional family have a place in the future?
If morality has no place, traditional family has no place in the future. Family security is based on the understanding of morality and practice of morality. If that is poo-pooed by the law, then we do not care about morality. It's an old thing of bygone days. Do whatever you like. Then at the same time, to have the same cake which they have eaten is not possible. Then family values must go down the drain even at a greater speed than you find them today. This is a small answer, but I understand your intellectuals who are here. You can develop it further and understand the correctness of this answer. Thank you. Please.
So on the question of man's relationship with the animal kingdom,
That's right.
so all part of creation, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, we're told that the snake is not a good chap,
Yes, sir.
nor is the goat. The goat is identified
Right,
with Beelzebub.
yes.
And when Jesus cast out spirits, he cast them into the Gadarene swine. I think were goats. I'm not sure whether they were pigs or goats. And then on the other hand, you have the Hindu reverence for the cow. Worship, I beg your pardon, sir.
That's right.
And then on the negative side again, you've got the Jewish and I think the Muslim abhorrence of the pig.
That's right.
Now, is that attitude, is that not an affront to the Creator who made the snake and the pig and the goat and the elephant and the cow as well
Yes,
as
if you do not
making meat.
understand the significance of their creation, then of course it's a blemish on the wisdom of the Creator. But if you begin to understand not only the philosophy of their creation, but also the terms used in the scriptures referring to them, then the problem is resolved very easily. Now I'll come to, because of shortage of time, I'll come to the significance of religious usage of these terms. Snakes are found within every person who raise their head to strike at the piety of man. And they do it always in the same way, which is misleading, according to the story of the Bible. They say it's good for you. The result will be excellent. And the result is disastrous. Now, how could that snake, which is ordinary snake, be referred to in the Bible, instead of showing its antagonism to man, it poses as man's friend? Evidently, that snake is hidden human snake, which does this, and which is the cause of all sin. It is said it was the cause. I say it is the cause, and it will remain to be the cause of all sin. That inner deceptive ego of man, which tells him that enjoy yourself. Old generations of people, old religious ideologies and ideas of discipline only prevents you from receiving pleasure. And they interfere with your freedom. But the moment you listen to that voice, then you begin to see the resultant destruction this submission to the voice does to the society as a whole. This is the same problem, family problem, which we discussed earlier. When that snake tells a person, why stick to one wife? Or why stick to one husband? Our natural desires are free. Why not fulfill them? Why suppress them? And suffer from the consequences of that suppression like Freud depicted. Just be free. This is the voice of the snake. But what happens is exactly the opposite. And what happens is never analyzed in society correctly and properly. If this argument of the snake is right, that in sexual relationship you should feel free, because it is an innate desire which should not be suppressed. It is not propensity to steal, to rob, to get whatever you want to have. Is that not an inner desire in every human? It is only prevented by law from implementation. But the suppression of Freud must work here as well. So the Freudian philosophy is also wrong, that this is suppression, this should not be done. It is suppression which disciplines man. And it disciplines man because man knows that the suppression in my case, is going to hurt others. Now, is not going to hurt others, it's going to help others. And the lack of suppression in other cases was going to hurt me. This is how the society is built, on a give and take philosophy. So these are very profound matters which should be understood properly. Then the modern myth of sexual freedom will completely go overboard. I think with that the time will go overboard. I take leave of you, please. So such a pleasure for me to have you today here. And it was a very interesting discussion, like all we enjoy with intellectuals. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.